This is going to be for comparisons of inequality. The first couple of things that I need you to remember is that sometimes it's really difficult to remember the difference because we have two different kinds of comparisons of called the comparative. So there's something called the comparative, and underneath the comparative, there are two different kinds of comparisons. We have the comparisons of inequality, and then we're going to have the comparisons of equality. That will be another video so that nobody gets confused about that. So I am going to pause the video several times, trying to make the letters appear on this white wall as clear as possible. So this is just the basics of what are comparisons of inequality. Let me move out of the way and just show you really quickly. Comparisons of inequality, basically it's things like more than, less than, better than, worse than. And so that's just a general idea of what comparisons of inequality are. Please, please, please remember that this is about comparisons of inequality, and I can't make that clear enough for you because comparisons of equality is coming up next, and please, please, please don't get that confused. So with our comparisons of inequality, they are used in three different ways. The first way that we use comparisons of inequality is with adjectives, adverbs, nouns, and verbs. Sometimes we need to take a little trip through what are adjectives, adverbs, nouns, and verbs. But I'll do a quick little overview about that right now, and then in the next section of this video, what you'll see is we will do examples of using comparisons of inequality with adjectives, and then comparisons of inequality with adverbs, and then with nouns, and then with verbs, because even though they're all lumped into the first category with which we use comparisons of inequality, the structure of the sentence is different. So just remember, first thing, we use comparisons of inequality to mean more than, más que, or less than, menos que, with adjectives, adverbs, nouns, and verbs. The second category with which we use comparisons of inequality is with numbers. When it's numbers, it still means more than and less than. The only difference is that, notice, we still have más and menos in both of these, but whenever you're using comparisons of inequality with numbers, we don't say más que, we say más de. We don't say menos que, we say menos de. So that is the big thing that you have to remember. It's really easy. Once you know how to do this, this is easy to figure out how to do. The structure is very similar or the same, but just remember that the de, anytime we're using a comparison of inequality and there is a number, you're going to do más de or menos de. While up here, we're doing más que and menos que. The third way in which we use comparisons of inequality is with mejor and peor. So from prior Spanish classes, you may remember that mejor means better. It has other meanings, but generally better or best, and peor, worse or worst. So when we're doing comparisons of inequality in our third function here, mejor que means better than, and peor que means worse than. So in the next portion of the video, we'll do way too many examples of más que, menos que, so more than and less than with adjectives, adverbs, nouns, and verbs. And then we'll use them with numbers or comparisons of inequality, and then we'll use them with the better than or worse than. The most important thing really is this function number 1 and function number 2 of comparisons of inequality. Just a quick little thing before we go. Uh-oh, doggies. It's like a mailman. We'll try. Remember that adjectives, forget about Spanish. Let's just think about English and grammar and stuff like that. So what are adjectives? Adjectives are describing words, and adjectives describe nouns. Jot that down, remember that, that'll help us in the next portion of this video. So adjectives are describing words and describe nouns. Adverbs are also describing words, but they describe verbs, so how something is done. Nouns, people, places, things, and verbs, action words. I don't mean to kind of dumb it down and take us back to first grade English class, but sometimes we forget our English rules and then we have no idea what's going on in Spanish. So coming up next, examples. So some examples now of comparisons of inequality with adjectives. You'll notice that whenever I do these videos, I'm going to try to make the letters as big as possible because I don't have enough money to buy like an iPad or any kind of tablet and do this high tech. So I'm doing old school as if it was a whiteboard, but I also don't want it to get too small or too blurry on you or whatever. So I know that I'm kind of, I don't know, shadowed or dark or whatever, and there might be a glare from the light and all that kind of stuff. So I'm just going to try to put some basic examples up on the white wall board thing that I have here at the house, and then say out loud to you other examples so that you can see how the sentence will change, morph, whatever. I put a little asterisk here because I don't know if you can see it or not that well, but it says S, P, M, F. This is letting us know that our sentence is going to change whenever we're doing comparisons of inequality with adjectives. This is going to, our sentence structure is going to change a little bit if we're talking singular, plural, masculine, or feminine. So if you guys ever see this SPMF thing, I'm just talking about the difference between gender and number. Remember back to like a Spanish 1 class, whenever we know that our adjectives have to match whatever they're describing in gender and number. So that's why I mentioned things like singular, plural, and masculine and feminine. So just think gender and number. What I've done in this is just giving you the formula and then 2 basic examples that we're going to morph a little bit. So the basic formula, remember, comparisons of inequality. Basic formula is we have más or menos, so either more or less, and then we have our adjective, and then we have the word que, and then maybe there's stuff that comes at the beginning of the sentence or at the end of the sentence, but that is our formula for the comparisons of inequality with adjectives. So remember, más or menos, and then comes your adjective, and then comes the word que. So notice in this first sentence, and we're going to change it a couple of times. We have la mujer, which obviously means the woman. La mujer es, the woman is. Then if we look at our formula, we have the word más, so obviously more. Then we have our adjective. I have underlined our adjective here in this exemplary sentence because we're working with comparisons of inequality with adjectives. So notice that inteligente is the adjective. That's the point we're trying to make in this portion of the video. So inteligente, and then we have up here in our formula the word que, and then the sentence will kind of go on depending on what we're comparing in our comparisons of inequality. And it says el hombre, which obviously means the man. So if we were to read our complete sentence, we have la mujer es más inteligente que el hombre. What does that sentence mean? It honestly is just a very basic Spanish 1 kind of sentence, meaning the woman is more intelligent than the man. Sometimes it's a good idea, even when things seem extremely simple, to make sure that you know what it means in English, because you look back at your notes later and then you forget or whatever. Also make sure that you write down this little formula up here. So once again, la mujer es más inteligente que el hombre. What if we switch that sentence up just a little bit? And what if we wanted to say not that the woman is more intelligent than the man? What if we wanted to say the man is more intelligent than the woman? What in the sentence would change? Not much, because we're still dealing with, we're comparing something that is singular to something else that is singular. So we don't have to worry about the number of anything. If I wanted to say the woman is more intelligent than the man, all I would do is say, el hombre es más inteligente que la mujer. If I wanted to change the sentence up once again, it would just be, el hombre es más inteligente que la mujer. Notice that all other components of this formula or this structure up here would stay the same. If I wanted to switch it up and make things plural, then let's see what would change. Let's say I want to say the women are more intelligent than the men. So now we're doing a comparison of plural things, or in this case, people. So we want to say the women are more intelligent than the men. This would obviously change to las mujeres, the women, las mujeres. This is our verb. Think back Spanish one. Soy, eres, es, somos, son. So we need our third person plural conjugation of our verb ser in the present tense. Las mujeres son más. And then, our adjective needs to be plural because we were comparing something that is plural. So this is not going to say inteligente. This is going to turn to inteligentes with an S on the end. Okay, and then the men, los hombres. So our new sentence, if we were to pluralize things and compare plural things, we would have las mujeres son más, here's our adjective, plural now, inteligentes que los hombres. And again, if we're going to flip it around and say, no, the men are more intelligent than the women, still comparing plural things, we will have los hombres son más, what would our adjective be? Plural, inteligentes que las mujeres. So again, our, I think, fourth sentence now with just this very basic first sentence, the men are more intelligent than the women. Los hombres son más inteligentes que las mujeres. The only other thing that we can do to morph that simple sentence is to say less than. So we right now are saying the woman is smarter than the man, or the woman is more intelligent than the man, or the women are more intelligent than the men, or the man is more intelligent than the woman, or the men are more intelligent than the women. But if we wanted to say less, the only thing that we would do in this sentence, obviously, if we're looking at our structure here, is just switch out the más for the word menos. So think about this pretty quickly. We would have the woman is less intelligent than the man, would simply just be la mujer es menos inteligente que el hombre. If we wanted to do the man is less intelligent than the woman, it would be el hombre es menos inteligente que la mujer. If we wanted to pluralize things, we would have las mujeres son menos inteligentes, plural adjective, que los hombres. And then the men are less intelligent than the women. Los hombres son menos, plural adjective, inteligentes que las mujeres. That is all we can do with that sentence. We've flippy-floppy things around. We've made things plural, etc. In this right here, we're still working with comparisons of inequality with adjectives. I have underlined your adjective, but I wanted you to get an idea of not just pluralizing your adjective, but also changing it from feminine to masculine or masculine to feminine. So if you remember, again, from like a Spanish 1 class, the word alto or alta is tall, right? So this alta is currently in its singular and feminine form. Why? It's an adjective. It describes the woman. So what are we comparing? We're saying the woman is more tall, or let's say in better English, taller, right? the woman is more tall than the man. So why is our adjective in its feminine and singular form? Because we're saying the woman is more tall. Remember, adjectives describe people, places, and things. So what is the adjective alto, or in this case, alta? Who is it describing? The woman. So watch how making the gender of things will change over sentence. So we have, the woman is more tall than the man. It will be, la mujer es más alta, singular and feminine form, because we're describing a singular woman, la mujer, que el hombre. If we wanted to say the man is more tall than the woman, or the man is taller than the woman, would our adjectives stay feminine and singular? No, it would have to change to masculine and singular. Why? Because if we wanted to say the man is more tall, or the man is taller than the woman, then obviously now we're describing the man, and we're comparing the man and his height to the woman's height. So our sentence would then change to being a masculine and singular adjective. It would be, el hombre es más alto, A-L-T-O, alto, que la mujer. Then if we wanted to pluralize things, remember that this will have to change also to plural. Let's go back to this sentence where we're having the woman here as the thing that we're comparing to the man. If we wanted to say the women are more tall than the men, or the women are taller than the men, this would be las mujeres, plural, feminine. Las mujeres son más, and then now our tall will have to be feminine and plural. So we will have, las mujeres son más altas, A-L-T-A-S. Las mujeres son más altas que los hombres. And then the last thing that we can do to this is, if we wanted to say the men are taller than the women, or the men are more tall than the women, if we put the men up here, our adjective will now have to be what? It will have to be plural and masculine. So we would have, los hombres son más altos, altos, A-L-T-O-S. Why? Because we're describing in our morphed sentence the men, los hombres. So los hombres son más altos que las mujeres. Those two examples show you everything that can be done when you are working with comparisons of inequality with adjectives, singular, plural, masculine, feminine. And the next thing we'll tackle is comparisons of inequality with things that are not adjectives. So that'll be the next section coming up. The next set is comparisons of inequality with adverbs. So we have the same structure where we have más or menos, and then we have our adverb, and then we have que. I only have one example written up here on the white wall board thing, but I'm going to morph it a couple of different times. There's one thing that you need to make sure that you have absolutely clear about comparisons of inequality with adverbs. Since adverbs do not describe people, since adverbs do not describe places or things, meaning since adverbs do not describe nouns, since adverbs describe how a verb is done, slowly, quickly, well, poorly, whatever, since we have adverbs in this sentence and not adjectives like in the last portion of the video, our adverbs do not change in gender and numbers. So I'll repeat that again because there's a little bit of noise from my doggy in the background. But So the thing that I would remember that will be key to knowing how to use comparisons of inequality with adverbs, once again, is that adverbs, and I have it underlined in this sentence, adverbs do not change feminine, masculine, singular, plural. Why? Once again, because the only reason for which our last set of sentences, the sentences with adjectives, changed feminine or singular or masculine or plural was because adjectives have to match the noun they're describing. These are adverbs and they're not describing a noun, they're describing how a verb is done. So jot that down. Whenever we're doing adverbs, adverbs do not match anybody or anything in gender or number. It doesn't matter how we morph this sentence, which we're going to do it like we did in the last set. It doesn't matter how we morph this sentence or who the subject is or who's being compared or if it's singular or plural or whatever. Our rápido, fast or quickly, is going to stay rápido. Some people will say, hey, but that looks like it's singular and masculine. If it were an adjective, it would be in its singular and masculine form, but this is just the base way to say fast or quick as an adverb when you're describing how a verb is done. Well, I'll just go into the example. So we have, I just wanted to give you guys some, let's call them parallel examples. So I'm sticking with the man and the woman just so you can see how whenever we use comparisons of inequality with adjectives versus with adverbs versus with nouns versus with whatever, you can see what changes and what doesn't. So we have la mujer, the woman, habla. What is habla? It's obviously present tense of the verb hablar, to speak or to talk. So la mujer habla más rápido que el hombre. It's a pretty basic Spanish 1 type sentence. That means what? The woman speaks or talks more quick or more fast, or in better English, not translating literally from Spanish to English, the woman speaks faster or quicker than the man. Remember, I'm leaving this like this. Why am I not changing it to feminine and singular? Because we are not describing the woman. We're not saying the woman is fast. We're saying the way in which she speaks or talks is fast or quick or faster or quicker than the man. So we have la mujer habla más rápido que el hombre. Now when we do our morphing that we did like in the last set of sentences, if I wanted to say, no, the woman doesn't speak more quickly than the man speaks more quickly than the woman, if I just flippy-floppy those around, then my sentence would be, el hombre habla más rápido que la mujer. Notice that our adverb did not change. So then if we pluralize things, we would have the women speak more quickly than the men. But remember, our rápido is going to stay the same because it's not describing the woman, it's not describing the man, it's not describing the women in our upcoming sentence, it's not describing the men in our sentence that's coming after that, it's describing the way in which the verb is done, which is fast or quickly, or more fast or more quick. So we have the woman speaks more quickly than the man. If we switch it up, the man speaks more quickly than the woman, or quicker. So it'd be el hombre habla más rápido que la mujer. Pluralizing things, if we wanted to say the women speak faster than the men, or the women speak more quickly than the men, las mujeres, what does need to change here? We can't have habla because that's for a third person singular present tense, but now it needs to be hablan. Think about present tense, Spanish 1, yo hablo, tú hablas, la mujer habla, but later on down the line in our conjugations we would have las mujeres hablan. Hablan. So if we wanted to say the women speak more quickly than the men, we would have las mujeres hablan más rápido, adverb doesn't change, que los hombres. And then the last morph that we can do to the sentence, now we're going to say the men speak more quickly or quicker than the women. So we would say los hombres hablan más rápido que las mujeres. But is the only thing I wanted you guys to get from this portion of the video is the thing that I tried to say at the very beginning, probably a couple different times, which is in our last portion, we were working with adjectives, and adjectives do change feminine and singular and masculine and plural because they're describing somebody or something. Adverbs describe how someone speaks. Doesn't describe a noun, it describes a verb. So the one takeaway from this, whenever you're dealing with adverbs, we don't care about anything being plural or masculine or feminine or singular. Our adverb is always going to stay the same. So now we're going to look at comparisons of inequality with other things, with nouns and with verbs. So now we have comparisons of inequality with nouns. Just like in the other examples I gave you, I have the formula up here at the top. So either más or menos. Remember, in all of the examples in the first video, I showed you how we can replace más with menos and vice versa. And whether I show it to you or not, it can always happen like that. So if we have más, it will just be more than. And if we have menos, it will be less than. So we have más or menos, and then we have our noun, which I have underlined for you. You probably already know that we're going to morph this sentence and see what changes and see what doesn't. And then we have the word que. So in this sentence, still sticking with the men and the women, what are we comparing? We're comparing somebody has more nouns than somebody else, right? So somebody has more things, let's say, than somebody else. In this case, what are the things that this person has more of? It's underlined for you. It's our noun. Zapatos. What are zapatos? Shoes, right? So remember, this is just comparing somebody has more nouns than somebody else, or somebody has fewer or less nouns than somebody else. And again, in this case, somebody has more shoes or less shoes than somebody else has. We have la mujer, the woman, tiene, tener, present tense, right? La mujer tiene, the woman has, more shoes, más zapatos, que el hombre. I have had students in the past in like on-ground in-person classes say, hey, why is shoes plural but the woman isn't, or whatever. I think my pretty weird, just simple, stupid answer to that question was because the woman has more shoes. It has everything to do with how many nouns that woman possesses. More than the man has. It has nothing to do whether the woman is plural or not, right? Because that sentence even translates pretty well into English. If we said the woman has more shoes than the man, I don't even think we have to understand anything about Spanish grammar as long as we say, oh yeah, that makes sense in English. We do the same thing. So we have, la mujer tiene más zapatos que el hombre. Again, the woman has more nouns, in this case, shoes, than the man. Switch it up just a little bit and let's say, no, you know what? The man has more shoes than the woman. The man has more shoes than the woman. So we would say, el hombre tiene más zapatos que la mujer. The man has more shoes than the woman. Then, just to switch it up, even though our noun's not going to change because we're still comparing the quantity of shoes that somebody has or doesn't have, more or less than the other person, you switch it up and say, okay, no, the women have more shoes than the men. Las mujeres tienen. So now we need our third person singular, our third person plural conjugation instead of our third person singular conjugation of tener in the present tense. So we have las mujeres, the women, tienen, T-I-E-N-E-N, tienen más zapatos que los hombres, would be that next sentence. So the women have more shoes than the men. And then if we switch it up for the last time, we would have the men have more shoes than the women, and that would simply be los hombres tienen más zapatos que las mujeres. And that is all that can happen with this kind of thing. Comparisons of inequality with nouns, you either have your más or your menos, and then your nouns. I have more this than you, or you have more this than they do, or whatever. You have your nouns and then your que, and whatever happens before or after that can change sentence by sentence. But if you just always look up here, this is our sentence structure that is at hand right now. And just really quickly, if we wanted to do menos, literally it would just be switching this out. So if I wanted to take our original sentence that we started with and say the woman has less shoes than the man, or the woman has fewer shoes than the man, literally it would just be switching out the más for the menos and saying la mujer tiene menos zapatos que el hombre. It shouldn't be that confusing. I think probably the adjectives one that we looked at first was the most confusing, and now we're going to go and see how this is used with verbs. So now, comparisons of inequality with verbs. Notice that the sentence structure is a little bit different because now we have our verb coming first, and then the más or the menos right before the que. In the other examples, it wasn't like that. It was más or menos, and then our adjective or our adverb or whatever, and then the que. But please again notice in this one we have our verb, and then we have our more than or less than together. So we have our thing about the men and the women again. I have underlined your verb in the sentence. The only thing that we have to remember about this structure is that our verb just simply has to conjugate appropriately based on whoever the subject is. So we have la mujer habla más que el hombre. Again, a very basic sentence, but it will be the woman speaks or talks more than the man. The woman talks more than the man. The woman speaks more than the man. La mujer habla, again, here's our verb, and then we have our más que. So our más que, like our formula says up there. The woman speaks or talks more than the man, and we want to switch it up and we say, no, the man speaks more than the woman. We will have el hombre habla, there's our verb. El hombre habla más que la mujer. So the man speaks more than the woman. If we want to pluralize things, obviously this conjugation of hablar in the present tense is conjugated based off of la mujer or el hombre. In our first two examples, we just did really quickly. And that will be a third person singular conjugation. If we pluralize these people up here, then obviously our verb will need to match accordingly based off of regular old Spanish one kind of rules. So it would change from habla to hablan, for example. So if I wanted to say the women speak more than the men, we would just say las mujeres hablan más que los hombres. And last but not least, if we wanted to switch it up and say, no, the men speak more than the women, those men in my class speak more than the women do, then it would be los hombres hablan más que las mujeres. And just really quickly, remember, you can always shove in menos instead of más. So if I wanted to go back to this first example and say the woman speaks less than the man, it would obviously and very simply be la mujer habla menos que el hombre. And that is pretty much all you can do with comparisons of inequality with verbs. So if you remember in the very first part of the video, I said that we were going to look at comparisons of inequality in 3 different ways. So the first way, we already looked at all of those examples. So it's comparisons of inequality with adjectives and adverbs and nouns and verbs. And then under the number 2, it said that we were going to look at comparisons of inequality with numbers. It's really easy. In the very first portion of the video, I said something about the only thing that you need to remember is that with numbers, we don't use K, we use they, D-E, they. So that's just a rule. It really is just a just cause kind of thing. So we have más or menos, more or less. When we say more or less than, and we're including a number, then we use they. So here we go. Still sticking with our men and women to keep kind of some parallelism in the sentences so y'all can see what changes or doesn't change. We have la mujer tiene más de 3 libros en su mochila. So let's break it down in a pretty simple sentence, but just to get used to the structure with the they when it's with numbers. So we have the woman tiene, has. The woman has más de, more than, de, because there's a number coming up, 3, 3, right? La mujer tiene más de 3 libros, books, en su mochila, in her backpack. So our whole sentence, the woman has more than 3 books in her backpack. Why is it they? Because we have a number. It doesn't matter whether I said the woman has more than 12 books, or the woman has more than 2 books, or the woman has more than 1 book, or the woman has more than 3,000 books. Since we're using a comparison of inequality with a number, we have to have a they instead of a K. There's not really much point in doing all the morphing that we did before, but just really quickly so y'all can see that not much changes. It would simply be if we tried to switch out la mujer for las mujeres, or la mujer for el hombre, or something like that. If we say the women have more than 3 books in their backpacks, we will have to change very simple Spanish 1 kind of things, but just remember that your más de 3, being the number 3, is going to stay the same. So we have, let's say, the women have more than 3 books in their backpacks. We have las mujeres tienen más de 3 libros en sus mochilas. They're more than 1 woman now, so they probably have more than 1 backpack, so that's why it would be sus mochilas. That would be a Spanish 1 thing maybe to review if that was confusing to you, but our point at hand is this, the más de or menos de. If we wanted to say the man has more than 3 books in his backpack, everything would stay the same except for this. It would be el hombre tiene más de 3 libros en su mochila. The man has more than 3 books in his backpack. What if they don't have to take that many books to school and they only have to take their laptop and 1 book or whatever, or 2, or it doesn't matter. And we wanted to say the woman or the man or the dog might have a backpack for all I care, but the man has, or the woman has less than 3 books. Obviously, we would just switch out más for menos, and we will have la mujer tiene menos de 3 libros en su mochila. And if you switch this out for menos, it would be the woman has less than or fewer than 3 books in her backpack. So the thing to remember with that is with numbers, comparisons of inequality, we use they. I think there's just 1 more example that I wanted to give you. Oh, it was with the mejor and the peor with comparisons of inequality. So that's coming up next, and that'll be the last portion of this video before we move on to something else. So the last thing that we can do with comparisons of inequality is with mejor que and peor que. Mejor, mejor que, better than, mejores que, also better than, but just in its plural form, we'll see that, and I put 2 examples up on the board, 1 in its singular form and 1 in its plural form. 1 more from just a little bit, and then peor que, worse than, peores que, also worse than, just in its plural form. So if I say mi libro es mejor que tu libro, then literally my book is better than your book. I have no idea why we're fighting about whose book is better, but let's say we are. So my book is better than your book. Mi libro es mejor que tu libro. But if the thing that we are comparing becomes pluralized, then our mejor, you can see, will change to mejores. It will change to its plural form. So up here when it was me comparing my singular book to your singular book, we had mejor que as our better than, but when I'm comparing my plural books that are better than your book, your books, or whatever, we have this mejor in its plural form with the es on the end, mejores, mejores que. So my books are better than your books. Mis libros son mejores que tus libros. If I wanted to say, you know what, I was wrong. My book or my books are not better than your book or your books. They're actually worse. Then we would just switch out for the peor or the peores. So it's my book is worse than your book. I'm gonna stop reading it. It's just horrible. Mi libro es peor. It would be P-E-O-R. Mi libro es peor que tu libro. My book is worse than your book. And if we pluralized my books are worse than your books. I'm going to stop reading all of them. Mis libros son peores. And it would be P-E-O-R-E-S. Mis libros son peores que tus libros. We can switch the sentences around and say, your book is better than my book, or your books are better than my books, or your book is worse than my book, or your books are worse than my books. Everything will stay the same with our mejor que, mejores que, peor que, peores que. Just really quickly, if we switched it around and made it your book or your books up here, my book or my books back there, everything stays the same, except for what we just said was switch itself up. So it would be something like, tu libro es mejor que mi libro. Your book is better than my book. What if your book is worse than my book? Tu libro es peor que mi libro. And then if we pluralize things, your books are better than my books would be, tus libros son better? Yeah. Tus libros son mejores que mis libros. Or your books are worse than my books. Tus libros son peores que mis libros. And that concludes every functionality of comparisons of inequality. So the next thing coming up is still the comparative. It's just now called different kind of comparative. Now it's comparisons of equality. So please remember that everything that we've talked about so far, comparisons of inequality, because something was better or something was worse, or somebody had more shoes or somebody had fewer shoes or less shoes, or somebody spoke faster or somebody spoke slower or whatever. So remember that we're comparing unequal things, because I have more shoes than you have, or you have more brains than I have, or whatever. But in our next kind of comparison, we're going to be doing comparisons of equality, and so we'll be comparing what we consider to be equal things. So that's comparisons of inequality.